Niger Delta Development Commission was primarily set up to deliver, in real terms, government policies and programs to the grassroots in Nigeria's oil-rich region. To what extent has this commission been able to deliver on its core mandate, with government consistently voting billions of dollars to support the NDDC, are the people of the Niger Delta in a position to say how much their lives have been improved or changed by the activities of the Commission? Has there been adequate synergy between this special purpose vehicle created by government and stakeholders in the region for a more effective and equitable distribution of development? What about the contributions of sons and daughters of the region who have been privileged to pilot the affairs of the Commission? And they say that they have made the best use of the opportunity provided to change the story of the Niger Delta, which has been more about environmental degradation, exploitation by the big oil companies, and an interplay of communal rivalry across the region. For a discussion around all of these questions, we are now being joined by AnnKio Briggs, Niger Delta Affairs activist and executive director and founder, Agape Birthrights, a non-governmental organization. Welcome to the program. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Good to have you on the morning show again. But quickly, before we begin to talk about the Niger Delta and the Niger Delta Development Commission, today is no longer a public holiday, but it's still a special day for Nigerians. Nigerians will remember that it was exactly on this day, 21 years ago, that Nigeria moved from military rule back to civilian rule. And it's been quite a journey since then. Now, just to start this segment of the program, I would like to have your observations, your assessment of how Nigeria has fared with democratic rule in the last 21 years, and how, in particular, democracy has either helped or not helped the people of the Niger Delta region.
Okay. Well, like you said, today is a special day. A lot of us will recall, even the youth of today will recall how far we have come and what led up to the point where we became a democracy, if you like, once again in the life of Nigeria, excuse me, after independence. But also for people from the Niger Delta region, it holds a different set of memories. If we remember, it was around the time that the late Abacha was preparing himself for from shifting himself as a military ruler to bringing himself to Nigerians as, if you like, a civilian ruler. And it was in that process that they packaged together what they called Youth Earnestly Call for Abacha, when the segments of youths, the group of youths that were brought in from Niger Delta region, particularly youths from Bayelsa and the Ijaw youth specifically, went to Abuja, a lot of them for the first time in their lives. And they were shocked that there was a place like Abuja, and even more shocked to realize that their sufferings, their pains was what made Abuja, as of then, what they saw. And so the agitation that led to Ijaw Youth Council, the Kayama Declaration, and the fights with the military in Ijaw land started. And so Abacha died, and we find ourselves continuing the agitation into the release of Obasanjo and the governance of Obasanjo. And Obasanjo came to Rivers State. At that time, people like Oronto were alive. Asari Dokubo, people like me, and so many other people were in that meeting with Obasanjo. And the agitation led to what we are now talking about, the Niger Delta Development Commission. If you remember, we had UMPADEC before then. And really, in the eyes of the Niger Delta people, and talking about the degradation of our environment, there is hardly any difference between what the UMPADEC was supposed to do and what the NDDC is supposed to be doing. And so for me and for a lot of us, there was a clash of purpose. But then the name changed, Niger Delta Development Commission, which it is not. It is not a development commission. It is an intervention agency, like you rightly described, to be able to assist in the process of carrying out government policy, federal government policy, really, because that was majorly and remains the problem of the lack of development and injustice in the Niger Delta. So I have NDDC been able to deliver on the things that it was set up to deliver? Absolutely and totally no. Despite the fact that we have had Niger Delta indigenes from across the 9 producing oil states, from other geopolitical zones, Ondo, Abia, and Imo, infused into the Niger Delta as a name, nothing really have been achieved. It's very clear. You cannot really see anything of solid effect that you can say the life of Niger Delta people, the circumstances of Niger Delta people have changed to a very great extent because of NDDC. And that is because the NDDC as an agency have been manipulated from the beginning by the federal government at the federal government level. Why do I say this? When you create an agency like that, and all the powers of that agency is vested in the federal government, and all the powers has to go through the National Assembly, and most of the time, the people who are involved in ensuring that we get what the NDDC is supposed to get are not people from Niger Delta in the National Assembly. You now have a situation where the budget is brought to the National Assembly and goes through their system, and all of a sudden, the people, the senators that are not even from Niger Delta are picking and choosing the jobs that they must have out of the budget that is presented to them before they can approve the budget for the NDDC. So it means, therefore, that the Niger Delta people who are who are appointed into the NDDC are appointed on the basis of political party. If it is PDP, PDP appoints members of PDP, whether people who have lost elections and people who they need to favor are in the NDDC. And so these people must answer to the people that have appointed them. The people of the Niger Delta region, on whose behalf the NDDC is set up, have no say in how the NDDC is run. You have silly projects like getting rid of Hisense, which really you can't do. And so it becomes a 1 million contract per person per time for youths of Niger Delta when they could get much more and better. And so while the youths of Niger Delta are fighting over 1 million, 2 million Hisense contracts, the people in Abuja are cutting away, along with some Niger Delta people in the NDDC, are cutting away the billions of naira and dollars worth of contract awarded to them. They've never been to the Niger Delta. Like, for instance, in my community, there is a company right now that have been awarded series of contracts, and I've seen the documents myself, is supposed to do silting in my local government area that covers Soku, Kola, Abonima, and all the other fishing ports. And yet, the young men that have had this contract, that they've broken up into under 900 million so that it comes below the 1 billion mark, of which has to be approved by the president himself. They've split it up in blocks that they don't have to take it to the president's office. And so they pay them in batches of 6 or 7 of that amount, and billions are fretted away. The jobs are not done. And yet we keep hearing all these billions and of dollars and naira is going into the NDDC. And it is not. It is going into people's pockets. It is going into the pockets of politicians who want to run for governorship in another 4 years. They are now appointed to the NDDC so that they can source for the funds that they're going to use to run their campaign and their election. So the Niger Delta people are completely cut off. And I begin to ask myself, on behalf of myself and my people, one, do we really need to continue with the NDDC as an agency, the amnesty as an agency, even the Ministry of Niger Delta as an agency? Because these 3 focused agencies that is claimed to have been set up for our people are actually crisscrossing. There is a head bashing of purpose, and so it becomes about the political parties, it becomes about the politicians, it becomes about their boys, and has nothing to do with the people of the Niger Delta. And finally, on this input I'm making, I still maintain that there is absolutely no reason whatsoever why there should be a seat on the board of the NDDC for a northerner. It's not about who it is. And even at that, the person who is there have been there for as long as I can remember. So we need a change. We need the government to change, and we need to decide actually whether we want the NDDC anymore, whether we want the amnesty anymore, and we want the Ministry of Niger Delta anymore, because none of them are of any benefit to the people of the Niger Delta.
Mrs. Briggs, thank you, and thank you for pointing out a lot of things here, the manipulation and heavy politicization of the NDDC that we have seen. I'd like to bring you up on the allegations of budget padding in the NDDC that have been in conversation a lot of recent. Now, I'm talking about this because both the acting MD and executive director of the NDDC have both made some rather serious allegations against the House and the Senate, namely actually saying that lawmakers inserted, or alleging that lawmakers inserted 500 projects into the 2019 budget, and also stating as well, and this was via Mr. Ojoogbo, who joined us on the show the other day, he said that the House of Reps, in his words, vandalized and raped the budget, adding 85 billion naira to it. So these allegations are heavy, but both the House and the Senate have come out on their side to say that these allegations are untrue. What do you really think is happening here, and what would you like to see as an outcome from the forensic audit?
Okay, fine. Now, first of all, my first input have already alluded to that in the way that I have made that presentation. I have categorically stated that if we have a real forensic audit, and this forensic audit, if it is not carried out by external audit companies from outside of Nigeria, when people say this person is incorruptible, that person is incorruptible, there is absolutely nobody that is incorruptible, including myself. But the difference is you make a choice to be incorruptible or corruptible. So everybody has the capacity to be corrupt. Even the woman selling a cup of garri in the market is corrupt if she chooses to cheat me when I buy a cup of garri. It doesn't matter whether it's 1 billion or 1 naira. Now, the audit must be carried out. If the audit is carried out, it will confirm a lot of the things that a lot of us have said. I particularly have never believed, and I state this every time I have the opportunity, I have never believed that the Niger Delta Development Commission have ever been allowed or have ever really willed to do what is right for the Niger Delta region and for the people of the Niger Delta. So yes, if there is going to be a forensic audit that we are going to put our trust in, like I said, it has to be from outside of this country. If it is not from outside of this country, we have no faith in it, we won't believe in it, And quite honestly, it will be difficult to accept because, again, as I said, if we go through the CAC and if we go through the jobs that have been allocated since the first job, since the days of Chief Onyema Ogochukwu till today, if we go through them systematically, you will find that if you put all the jobs that have been given in one box and put the faces and the ethnic nationalities to the people that have taken these jobs first, you will find that they're not from Niger Delta. Hey, you cannot give me a commission. Identify that commission to me and me to that commission. And everybody who has the final say on this commission and what the commission is supposed to do is not from Niger Delta. You might as well take it because it's of no value, it's of no consequence to us. What the Niger Delta Commission is serving is a few people that get the jobs, so-called, a year after year and government tenure after government tenure, and nothing. You see on paper that so bridge, so road, so jetty have been built, and yet they are phantom.
Well,
you cannot see them with your eyes.
If I may interrupt you, I think that point is well made. But there was something you said earlier on about the inclusion of Northerners in the board of the NDDC. I would like to ask you, how many Northerners are in control of the Niger Delta Development Commission? Because part of the concern has been that it's the people of the Niger Delta themselves who are their own worst enemies. Cairo Juogo was on this program earlier, sometime last week, and he pointed out that some of the committees in charge of, or the committees on the Niger Delta in the National Assembly, that's House of Reps and Senate, that the chairpersons are people from the Niger Delta. And also the directors, the managing directors, the ministers in charge of the Niger Delta, also in charge of the amnesty program, they've all been from the Niger Delta. How is it that the people of Niger Delta have not been able to help their own people? And then when I asked you to do an assessment of what has happened since 1999, how about the governors? When NDDC was set up in 2000 by President Obasanjo, it was supposed to just be an intervention agency focusing on development. It was not supposed to be a replacement for the governors in those, for the governments in those various states of the Niger Delta. Will you blame the governors also, who are also from the Niger Delta area and have also not delivered?
Okay, fine. Now, first of all, I did not say that there was more than one. And I also, that is a northerner on the commission of the Niger Delta Development Commission. Now, when anything concerns the North, when you mention anything, especially if you're from the Niger Delta, and you mention an injustice, and you highlight that injustice by pointing out that a northerner has something to do with it, it becomes very hot. Everybody wants to drop it. Well, I'm not going to drop it. What I said is that I see no reason why there should be a northerner. It doesn't matter whether it's a woman, doesn't matter whether it's a man. There should not be any northerner, one a northerner or half a northerner on the board of the Niger Delta Commission. Now, having said that, the fact that the NDDC have been mismanaged is not in question. That it has been looted is not in question. But it is also not looted and mismanaged only by the Niger Delta people. It has been looted and mismanaged by almost every person that is in government and has a say in how the Niger Delta is operated. Whether it is the presidency, we are not happy with the way that the Niger Delta Commission is used, as I said, as a payback, as a justification, as a thank you, even as a plan by a political party to make sure that a political party is retained And the way to do that is to pick somebody from a Niger Delta state, infuse him into the commission, and let him access the billions and billions of naira that is supposed to come to the Niger Delta Development Commission. Nobody is talking about the billions of naira that the federal government owes the Niger Delta Commission. Later, Yaradua said that it has expired. Money does not, you cannot owe me and say it has expired. It does not expire. So there are those things. Now, you cannot offer a budget to a commission on paper and tell me that the budget is 100, just hypothetically, the budget is 100 billion naira. And yet, in total, the money released between January or between the financial year, whenever it starts and ends, is not up to 50% of the budget that you have in paper. Then what happens to the other money? Now, the issue of governments of the Niger Delta states that that people are saying, ask your governor of the Niger Delta state. Yes, that is a question we cannot run away from. But my position as a person and the position of my organization have always been and will remain that when you put the Niger Delta state and the politicians of the Niger Delta in a position where they are answerable to a political party or to the government of the day, instead to the people that they govern, you will have these clashes. And that is what we have today. Yes, there has been mismanagement. Even in my own state, we have finished projects from one government to another. It's not just only Dr. Peter Odili's government or Amechi's government or Wike's government that he has still not finished. When he finishes, we will fully look at his government.